And it's not simple. We have to stop looking for the easy answer, the easy person that we can blame, the single neck to choke. We have to stop being intellectually lazy and start attacking this from multiple angles. But one of the things that really encouraged me about this was, as you had talked about, the people came out. The people right now are, the residents right now are working hard to make sure that their fellow Angelenos can get back to some sort of normalcy, or at least they realize that
they're not alone. Hi, welcome to episode 27 on Love, Growth, and Narratives. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Fredrick.
And one thing I want to say at the top of this podcast is that we are going to revamp things a little bit. In the past, we tried to go in the order of the name of the podcast, Love, and then Growth and Narratives, and keep, going through that each week. But we decided to go with the way that we started this podcast in the first place, which is whatever we're talking about. Like, we're always talking, we're always on some hot topic or hot button and having a deep conversation. And so we are going to just go with whatever came up that week and do that on the podcast. It'll still fit those categories, but we're not going to stifle ourselves by trying to find something that particular week because it's the love week. So Bear with us as we make this little switch. Want to add anything to that?
No, just that in keeping with that, for this episode, we're going to talk about the wildfires that are down here in Southern California and some of the misinformation that has been coming out in the news. And a lot of it is also because, we have family on the East Coast. And so we're constantly getting phone calls and text messages. And, we hear that the whole city of Los Angeles is on fire, which is not even close to being true. But then when you look at the news, it sure makes it seem that way. So we're going to discuss that.
Yeah. It's understandable for people who don't have a clear understanding of LA. I mean, even some people within California are like, are you near that? Or, not everyone understands like exactly where it's at. But we are safe. There's ash on our car, and at times the smell is really hard to bear. But we are not in an area that we need to worry about the fire coming to, unless there's a fire at the park that's just behind us. Then we would be concerned. But that would probably be somebody intentionally setting that because the embers won't make it way over here.
Right. So with that said, I think we should go ahead and get started with the episode. What do you think?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right.
Okay, so as you've seen on the news and social media, that it's been complete devastation in the Palisades area and Altadena, Pasadena, and a few other areas that burned. But what I would like to say is that we've been able to go out and see how many people are coming together to help these people who have lost their homes.
It's been awesome.
Yeah. We tried to do some volunteering today. We were able to donate some water. But so many people were volunteering that they actually were turning away volunteers. So
crazy.
That was good to hear, but they still need as much, materials like water and things for babies and for women specifically, and clothes and food, shoes, everything. So it's good to see though how much people are donating. Like, it's amazing. If you haven't seen it, take a look at some of these, social media pages that are showing the people getting out there and being helpful to their neighbors or even to strangers. A lot of the people who are doing a lot of the help are not in those areas that are impacted, obviously. So that has been incredible to see. That part I don't even know if the media is showing just how much people are coming together for other people.
Yeah, it's crazy because I never thought there would be a situation where we couldn't even volunteer. We drove all over the area to all the different organizations, and they were like, no, we have enough. Stop. And so I think that's absolutely awesome, because that means that the community really came out to support their their fellow Angelinos.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. With that, there you've been hearing a lot on the news, all different kinds of things. People are pointing fingers at different people, politicians, about who didn't do what or who should have done what and why this happened. And then you got your conspiracy theorists. And so, you know, Frederick has taken the time to do some research and just keep in mind, I think we've had a podcast about this before, that when you get a piece of information, there can be parts of it that are true, and then there's parts of it that are either misinformation, completely left out,
Or disinformation.
and the whole story isn't told. And you're never probably going to get the whole story, but it is important to go past the headline.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's important is that even though we live in Los Angeles, as well as we've researched it over the past several days, I would say take what we say with a grain of salt.
Right.
Because the information that we have and that we want to give, I don't consider it exhaustive. I think we're doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I found, and I find this in every situation, is people go towards, one thing to blame or one cause, and people call it, being monocausal, thinking that one thing is the problem and one thing is going to fix it. And the difficulty is that when you have a monocausal thought process and you fix that one thing, you're frustrated as to why the problem keeps coming.
Right.
And what we found that in this situation, that a lot of the media that we've seen wants to jump on the government, the state and local government. Why was the mayor out of the country during the fires?
Mm-hmm.
And you can have your opinion one way or another about that. I don't really think that was a big deal that the mayor was out of the country, but people can have their own thought processes. Another narrative comes up that the fire chief was a DEI hire, which you know I know how a lot of people come down on the whole situation of being for or against what we would call DEI. The question is she qualified? And through the notes, and I'm going to pull some of my notes here, so excuse me, but from what I've seen, she was nominated for her position in 2022 under the previous mayor, Garcetti. Um, she has been a firefighter, a paramedic, engineer, fire inspector, captain, battalion chief, assistant chief, fire marshal, and a deputy chief over the past 22 years.
Wow. She sounds qualified.
Yeah. Interestingly, but because she's a woman and a lesbian woman, we want to make that's why she was hired, not because she was eminently qualified for the job.
Right.
And so I saw this on the news, especially like Fox News and some of the others. They say, oh, well, she was a DEI hire. But at no point did they say, is she qualified?
Mm-hmm.
And so that part is a little frustrating. Do you have anything to say about that?
I mean, what I want to say is the assumption that anyone who is anything other than what people are used to being in charge of things, that they are a DEI hire and that they are not hired based on anything that they know, experience, or any of that. That's very ignorant, because the assumption is that everyone who was in the positions prior to the whole DEI movement had the qualifications and had, the education behind them. And that's just not the case. We know that there's always been people who are not qualified in positions, and they could be men, women, black, white, whatever. And the reason DEI came along is so that we can get people in there who are diverse but are still qualified. So anyway, the fact that people are questioning that just based on looking at her
Right.
and based on the hot topic of, we DEI is, unfair or whatever the case may be,
Right.
and just throw that out there like that without throwing out also her qualifications.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, even if you're a person who's against DEI or affirmative action or any of these things, just put that off to the side and ask yourself for a moment, is she qualified?
Mhm.
Is she qualified? Because we know that before DEI and before affirmative action, all hires were done on merit.
Right.
Sorry. It was a total meritocracy before that, and then, people got involved with their DEI and their affirmative action, and now no one's qualified. So we went from everybody being qualified to now no one is qualified. And so, I mean, how do we unscrew that? I tell you, I just really don't know.
Right.
So, I say that in jest, but it is frustrating that it, as you said, that if the person doesn't look a certain way and behave a certain way, that the DEI label is handed to them. And so, putting the whole problem of the fires on her and on her hiring by Garcetti, there again, even if she were not qualified, I don't see where that is the cause of what's going on right now.
Right.
Another one has to do with the fire department not having enough staff, and they go through that. Not enough fire trucks. You can talk about the situation with the reservoirs. You can talk about a lot of things.
Can I interject for just
Mhm.
1 minute? I want to say, when we talk about there not being enough staff, let's think about this for a moment.
Yeah.
That there's usually not enough staff in some of the most important positions in education, in our medical field, police officer, firefighters. That society needs
Yes.
to take a look at themselves and see
Yes.
why there's not enough put in there financially, put in the right places. Why are we lacking in some of the most important careers ever?
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, we can blame this, that, and the other person, but we as a society, we also have to step into that.
And that's honestly a critical point, because what people don't want to think about is when you staff up, that costs money, and that money has to come from somewhere. So it ends up more often than not coming from the tax base.
Mhm.
So now your taxes are going up. And you also have to look at, when you're looking at 60 to 100 mile an hour Santa Ana winds coming through, which has, at least from what I've read, never happened in recorded history.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, let's just say that you're the mayor or you're the fire chief and you're trying to staff up for something that's never happened before.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right.
How long are you going to be in office after you've done something like that?
Right.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Right.
And where the fire has hit the most people, which is probably the Palisades, or not the most people, but the most land, it's probably the Palisades. And the Pacific Palisades I know fairly well, because our son went to middle school at the edge of Brentwood and Pacific Palisades, over there at Paul Revere. And when you look at how narrow the roads are, you're looking at 1 and 2 lane roads. As you start to get up into the hills, you're looking at 1 lane roads. A lot of them are very narrow, and they wind up through there, and you have cars parked on the road because they have to in some cases. You have some apartment buildings. You have a lot of populations that are up in this area that it's very difficult for a fire truck to get to.
Mhm.
And so then you're in a situation where you're saying, okay, well, what about the helicopters and the planes being able to drop water?
Mhm.
There again, 60 to 100 mile an hour Santa Ana winds.
Right.
Good, you're not going to get me in a helicopter in those kind of winds.
Right. You have to think about the safety of these
Yes.
people. Like you don't want them to end up hurt and dead,
Yes.
and you definitely have less people to fight.
Yes. And some of these areas, there are no paved roads to get up through there. When you start looking at some parts of Topanga Canyon, there are areas where there just aren't roads. And so it's not as easy as if you look at parts of the city that are sitting on a grid where you have several different ways to get in and out. You're looking at some of these places where you have one way in and one way out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so looking at that, you can't just blame that either. What you're looking at basically is a perfect storm. Where you had the winds coming through, where you had one of the reservoirs was not working because it was down for repairs, and you can discuss whether that makes sense, that the repairs hadn't been finished yet. The repairs, I think, started at the beginning of last year, and you can debate whether enough resources were put into making sure that reservoir was available for the fire season. But then you also have to look at, even if it were repaired and full of water, would that have really had that much of an impact when you're looking at water pressure and you're looking at having to pump water up these hills and things of that nature? It's frustrating that we're just looking at, just trying to find ways to point the finger.
Right. And we're not saying that things couldn't have been handled better or differently. And, maybe more homes or people or animals and so on could have been saved. However, this was not a normal situation in any way, shape, or form. And it was going to be outrageous. Like, you can't control some of the issues that were happening there.
Yeah.
Right. And you're still dealing with humans, so we have to keep that in mind. Right. Like, we think of, first responders as superheroes, but they are humans.
Yes.
They are humans who are trained to do this work. But you've probably seen some footage of the firefighters just losing their energy, falling out. Like, it's night and day that they're having to work on this.
Right.
So keeping all of these things in mind when you're passing judgment or you're putting it all together to try to make sense of something, like, you have to look at many different factors.
Yes. And one of the things that it kind of hit me as I was researching a lot of this is, have we become complacent and entitled because we assume that when things happen that the local government is going to come in to save us? And so I'm not just talking about the fires. I'm talking about with crime. I'm talking about with healthcare, with all these education, where we are just assuming that someone from the local government is going to fix it or save it or build it or do it, when some of this is incumbent upon us to actually try to figure out what can we do to help the situation.
Right.
And I feel almost guilty talking about this, because while I'm talking about this, people have lost their homes.
Yes.
And I really don't want to place blame at their feet, because of the fact that, now they've been thrown from their homes. Some people, which is interesting, is that some people have been evacuated from their neighborhoods. The neighborhoods did not burn down, but the looters came through. And then there was a report today that you had looters dressed as firefighters trying to break through.
Unbelievable.
In order to break into these homes.
Yeah. It's just disgusting. I mean, that's a minority, and there were also some people who were helping a local person whose home they were trying to evacuate, and they were moving things and helping them get things out. And somebody who filmed them created a narrative that they were looting, and they weren't. So keep an eye out for that video as well. But no, we're not shifting any blame
No,
on the
absolutely
people
not.
who have, the victims
Absolutely
of
not.
this, but we're saying like the rest of us, right? Like
Right.
when you see all these people coming together, helping out, the government wouldn't have been able to do that
No.
as quickly, right? And I'm not
No.
excusing the government. They, there's still things we should expect from
Yes.
them.
Yes.
But the whole point is don't expect everything from them while we sit back.
Right.
And that's in everything. Without this huge disaster happening, there's other areas, like you said, that seem smaller, everyday things that we need to be more involved in.
Yeah.
And so that the big catastrophes
Yes.
either don't happen or we're better equipped to handle them.
Yeah, I mean, also the situation with water in Southern California. We don't get a lot of rain, but I've read a lot of things back and forth about, is the water crisis really as bad as everyone is making it out to be? Is there really enough water where we could be watering our lawns and areas around our homes in a lot of these fire prone areas? So these are the things that we have to start thinking about, and it's not simple. We have to stop looking for the easy answer, the easy person that we can blame, the single net to choke. We have to stop being intellectually lazy and start attacking this from multiple angles. But one of the things that really encouraged me about this was, as you had talked about, the people came out. The people right now are, the residents right now are working hard to make sure that their fellow Angelenos can get back to some sort of normalcy, or at least they realize that
they're not alone.
Yes.
They're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
People adopting or fostering pets.
Yep.
People helping the elderly get out of a home. Just it's been incredible to see.
It has.
All kinds of people.
It has.
From all different kinds of areas.
Yep.
All ages. When we went out there today, it was like really young, like teens out there helping out, which is so amazing to see. Get your teen out there. We had ours in the back seat. It's just incredible when you see people come together, like what they can do for each other when we're not fighting and divided and in our camps pointing fingers. There's no time for that.
Absolutely. And there was another one of the early causes that the news was talking about was the mayor trying to lower the budget of the fire department.
Oh yes, definitely talk about that.
And I started to go down a bit of a rabbit hole on that, because what I saw was, first off, it seemed like she was trying to lower part of the budget, but also trying to raise another part for people who haven't worked in government or in situations where you're constantly working with budgets. You normally have several different buckets of money to draw from. And so even though you may have less money in one bucket, you may have an increase of money in another. And so you have to look at this comprehensively. And from my reading, at least, it seemed like the fire department is almost experiencing an increase in funding, but it's kind of the way that it's being shifted. And money is always shifting when it comes to government because of budgetary issues. Contrary to popular opinion, these especially these local governments don't have unlimited budgets. They can't do everything, especially when you don't want to pay additional money in taxes.
Right. And I'm sorry, and didn't you say, I wanted to clarify, didn't you say, yes, there were some firefighters that I believe retired, or some positions that were eliminated and not put back in?
Yeah, there were some positions that, from what I read, there were, hold on just a second. Sorry, we had a little technical difficulty there. But
no, like go into, so she did cut in terms of she didn't replace some positions.
Right.
However, the firefighters got an increase in pay
Right.
and some new equipment.
Yeah,
Right.
so that was one of the things that I was reading about the other day. That yes, there were firefighters that were retiring, and their positions were not being backfilled, which a lot of people were upset about. Which I'm not trying to say is right or wrong,
Right.
but then there was a vote for the existing firefighters to have a raise in pay as well as additional equipment. And I'm not trying to defend Mayor Bass because I got to be, I don't know the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to admit I don't know the whole situation. And I think that as people quickly rush to judgment when they really don't know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
that's frustrating, and it's not helpful. And it doesn't help us in the future, because if you lay all the blame on Mayor Bass and you get rid of her, you're going to wonder why you still have the same problems. That's that monocausal intellectual laziness that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different reasons. And at some point, we also have to look at ourselves as Angelinos and as people everywhere. Whenever you see disasters happen, whenever you see any kind of tragedy, we have to really look at ourselves and the way we move and what we're willing to do to affect our own communities before we start laying everything on the feet of government officials.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
So that's really the major message here. First off, in at least where we are in Los Angeles, we're fine.
Mm-hmm.
We do have, ash on the cars, and, we can smell it and we can see it when we look in that direction towards
Mm-hmm.
the fires, but we're okay. It hasn't hit all of Los Angeles, which is what it kind of makes it seem like,
Right. Right.
on the
Mm-hmm.
news.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're definitely all impacted
Yes.
because emotionally we have family, we have friends, people had land over there. And I know, several people who either lost their homes or, like you said earlier, they had
Yeah.
to evacuate. Their home is still there, but they can't be there. They're not allowed to go back.
Yeah.
The National Guard won't allow that.
Yep.
And so of course they need to be able to be housed somewhere in the meantime,
Yes.
And it just creates a huge, you know, um, probably a ton of anxiety for
It
everybody,
does.
right?
It does.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor.
Mm-hmm.
When the place you call a refuge is no longer available to you,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna bother you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. And unfortunately, a lot of these people who've lost their homes because of what's happened with the insurance industry in California are not going to be covered,
Right.
and that's tragic.
Mm-hmm. It is.
That's tragic.
Yes. And let's keep in mind too, all the people who have lost their jobs because they worked for these people in their
Yes.
homes, right? Gardeners and maids and probably nannies if you're
Yes.
talking about the wealthier area. And then if you're talking about Altadena and Pasadena, well, Altadena specifically
Mm-hmm.
is a historically Black area.
Mm-hmm.
People were there for decades and they got those homes out of a bad historical situation.
Yes.
And it's not going to be as easy to rebuild because they don't probably have the same financial backing or the same money in the bank that
Yes.
in Palisades. Not saying everybody in Palisades is wealthy,
Right.
but and losing your stuff is losing your stuff, whether
Yes.
you're rich or poor. Like what something
Yes.
means to you, that doesn't matter. But we're just talking about the rebuilding. We want to be able to
Yes.
see that area rebuild and for the same people to be able to get back into,
Right.
a place they've been in for decades.
Absolutely. And
You
a
know?
lot of these homes, as you were saying, have been passed down,
Mm-hmm.
have been in families forever. And it's like, even if you have insurance, even if you have money, just the fact that is gone. And when you're told to evacuate, what do you take with you?
Exactly.
I guarantee the majority of the stuff that you really care about aren't gonna get into your car
Mm-hmm.
in order for you to evacuate. And you've lost stuff. If you've had pictures that you took in the 70s and 80s that were never digitized, if,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
yearbooks, you know,
Yeah.
all those different types
Yeah.
of things, that stuff is gone. And I don't care how rich you are, you're gonna miss that.
Right.
That has an
Absolutely.
impact on you.
And I have to say shout out to firefighters that I've seen
Yes.
on social media, like saving those things when they could, taking the photo albums out and sitting them out on the curb. Somebody's like grandfather clock, that antique, and that's amazing that they're taking the time to do that. They know how important this is, and they still have this really
Yes.
tough job to do, you know. And so I just think that's incredible that they're trying to save some things if they can. But like you said, it's really hard to decide what you're going to take. And some people couldn't take their cars. Some people had
Right.
to abandon their cars. So
Yes.
you can only carry so much, right?
Yes.
So number one, you want to get out your loved ones, right? And your pets. That's obviously the priority.
Mhm.
But there are other things that you need to grab. I mean, we would say the advice we can give to everyone, regardless of what kind of natural disaster area that you're in, is like have a home safe you can
Yes.
and put
Something
you know,
fire rated.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have one, and we, put some important, it's not very big, but we've got some important papers in there, and do what you can to, prepare. You can't really prepare for what just happened, but
Right.
there are certain things, like we always say that, living in Los Angeles, we should have an earthquake bag.
Right.
And for a while I did, and now I don't, right? So
Yeah.
something happened.
Need a go bag.
Yeah,
Yes.
you definitely need one. And so, if you're seeing these lists about what you should gather and prepare and set aside, like take heed to that, even
Yes.
though this isn't impacting you directly right now, because you never know.
Yeah, we all have work to do to be better to ourselves and our communities. And like I said before, you can't expect for, the firefighters, the police department, the mayor and the government officials to save you. And this is not a knock on them at all. It really is not. It's just that sometimes we do get entitled by what's going on, and we have to do a better job. But in Los Angeles, it the way the community has come in, hopefully we can work towards keeping this momentum so that when future fires happen, because future fires will happen.
Absolutely.
That's where we live. Fires
happen.
are going to happen. Let's keep the energy going and make sure that we can protect ourselves as well as the folks in our community when those things happen again.
Right. Absolutely. So we hope that we've shed some light on what's happening here in Los Angeles and given you something to think about. I know I saw a post on Instagram, I believe it was on LA Times, and it was a reporter talking about something that was in the headlines, either something Trump said or something Gavin said, I don't remember. But the point of it was that you need to fact check these things before you share them. So she pointed us in the direction of a site that if there's a photograph, you can drop it in there and it'll tell you, right? Because people are using photographs from years ago to try to say it's something that's happening now.
Yeah.
And then there's also sites where you can fact check other things before you share it, because just sharing something without having looked into it at all is kind of irresponsible. Right?
Yeah, I would say real quick, be careful of the fact checking sites because, with the fact checking sites, I've seen a few of them. I don't know who is in the background checking facts. I don't know who they are. I don't know what their qualifications are to be fact checkers.
Right.
And just because they have a site calling themselves whatever factcheck.com, it doesn't mean that I'm going to believe what they have to say. And to be honest with you, the way the news is these days, it's really hard to know exactly what's going on.
It is.
But if you attack it from several different angles, you'll find that you're in a better position to at least get a good idea what's going on.
Right. So which means you might even need to listen to or watch a station that you normally wouldn't to get some missing information. I know that's really hard because there's some stations that are just outright circus, but you still want to know what they're saying. You want to know.
Well, I think that you have to make a distinction. There are a lot of podcasts that I watch and listen to that I frequently disagree with. But the difference is that I respect their thought process, and I feel like they're very thoughtful and intelligent and make good faith arguments.
Mhm.
And so even though I may disagree with a lot of their conclusions, I can feel confident that they're really thinking about it.
Mhm.
Whereas there are others who have podcasts and videos and stuff where I just can't respect their thought process. And
Mhm.
so it really doesn't serve me at all to look
Right.
at what they have to say.
Right. Like some are just blame, blame, blame,
Right.
and it doesn't make any sense. Just saying whatever,
Yes.
So check yourself, check it out,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, and like keeping that in mind.
Yeah. But I think that people should pursue um, podcasts and news sites that they normally don't agree with, but can at least be confident that they're making good faith attempts at portraying reality, even if you disagree with their conclusions.
Mhm. What are a couple of name some of those stations that you watch where one of the newscasters is to the right and one's to the left, and they kind of, you know.
Well, I don't want to plug it when I can plug them, but no. I mean, one of my favorites is Breaking Points,
Okay.
and that's because what they do is on each show, there's two main anchors, and then they have some other people that'll come in as well. But they
Mhm.
normally have one person on the right and one person on the left, and I love the way they debate because they're good faith arguments. There's no name calling. There's no yelling and screaming. And you can tell at the end there's nothing personal.
Mm.
And so yeah, Breaking Points is one of my favorites. But there's a lot of them out
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we're coming to the close of
Yep.
this topic. We would, please donate, give whatever you can, even if it's just $5. Send things, gift cards or what I hear is really needed for people, and obviously water and just the little things that we don't think about that are such essentials, right? Like toothbrush, like these are small things, but keeping in mind that these people lost everything,
Yes.
everything other than the clothes on their back in most cases. So give if you can. I know we're coming off of the holiday season and all of that, but you never know when it could be you. So, help out your fellow American.
Yeah, and I would say
Not
that
just American, everybody,
Yeah.
whoever. I don't know why I said that.
and I would say that I really am appreciative to all the people that who live in different parts of the country who I know who've reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And some of these people I haven't talked to in a few years, and is everything okay in LA? And are you okay? And I would say continue to reach out to people and check on them and make sure they're okay.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So as we draw this episode to a close, Tiffany, you got any final words or?
I don't. I think I've said everything that I really want to say. How about you?
No, I want people to be mindful of blaming one thing, of that monocausal type of thought process, and just understand that we all have a part to play in our own futures and how well our community does and everything else. And so for this episode of Love, Growth, and Narratives, I'm Fredrick.
And I'm Tiffany.
Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.